Hey everyone, so today we're going to be doing a super simple JavaScript little app here called Secret Code. So the idea here is you can type in any word you'd like and it will actually reverse that word and send back a little encrypted message. And if you have a friend who also has access to this app, you can send them your encrypted message. They can add it here, hit submit, and it will actually unencrypt the message. And yeah, so let's see. Okay, so the first thing we're going to jump into here is actually the HTML. I'm not going to get too much into file setting up or boilerplate or anything like that. Feel free to copy what I have here. I'll leave it in my GitHub, so feel free to grab it from there. Just a few things to point out. In the body, I have a form here. I have a div class called form. I have an h2 element that is just a title for my app. I have a paragraph, which is just a description and also some directions of how to use the app. I have my type. I have an input here. My type of input is text. I have form control for the class. I have message for the ID. And for a placeholder, I just have another write your secret message here. So just instructions how to use the app. I also have a required tag at the end just to make sure that the user is actually inputting something without hitting the submit button. Speaking of submit buttons, I have the submit button right here at the last element of this form. And then just outside of the form, I have an empty div element called output. And this is where we will actually output our encrypted reversed message to. So let's jump into the JavaScript. The first thing I want to get onto the page is something onto the page. So we're going to do that by creating a simple function. And this is just to be able to render any HTML elements that we'd want into whatever selected div that we choose as well. So I'm going to do that by creating a function here called render to DOM. Render to DOM is going to take in two arguments here. So we're going to take in a div ID. We're also going to take in an HTML. Let's just call it to render. So now we open up our function here. And the first thing we're going to want to do is grab our selected div. So to do that, we're going to create a new variable called selected div, and then we're going to use document.querySelector, and then we're going to target whichever div ID that we end up putting into our function at the top here. Next, we want to take that selected div that we just established. We want to target its inner HTML, and we want to set that inner HTML to whichever HTML that we want to render there. So now we have this little function, and if we actually call that function, so render to DOM, and we put in, let's go back and see where we want to put this HTML into, which would be our div ID of output. So we're going to go ahead and put output here for our first, and for our second, we're going to do, let's just try hello and see if that works. Okay, so you can see on our page now we have this little bit of information that says hello, and that is actually exactly what we rendered to our DOM here. So now the goal would be to take whatever the user puts in here and actually listen to this button and then output reversed string here. All right, let's jump back into JavaScript. Okay, so now that we know that the render to DOM function is working, we can get rid of that. Next thing we're going to do is actually make sure that our form is being selected, and that makes sure that JavaScript knows it's here. So we're going to do const form, And we're also going to do document.querySelector, and we are going to grab what we called form. Oops. So now we have our form selected, and we have it called form within our JavaScript. So now we actually want to take whichever user input is being put in. We want to then take that string and we want to reverse it. We then want to return it in the reversed form. So how we're going to do that is creating a function. So to do that, we're actually going to create a function that is going to listen to our button. It's going to listen to our form. So we're going to do const, and I'm going to call this secret message. E for event, because we're going to be listening for when we actually click on to our submit button. And so I'm going to add this little bit of code here. Prevent default F-A-U-L-T. And all this does is actually make sure that the form isn't doing its automated process, which is basically clearing. We want to be able to put something in here that the form is doing before it clears, and then we can go ahead and clear it or have it do what it actually wants to do naturally. If that doesn't really make sense, don't really worry about it. Just know you kind of have to have that here for your form in this case. And once you have it connected, you can kind of play around with it and see why it exists there and some things like that. So now let's get into actually scrambling the input that we're going to get. So I'm going to create a new function called scramble. And scramble is going to do a few things. So first, it's actually going to take in our user input. So we want to do const user input, and that's just something I'm naming it. And we're going to do document.querySelector once again. And we're going to take in the message dot value. And what this is actually, oh, that's not right. Let me do value here. So here we're going to actually grab this ID of our HTML called message, which is our user input here. So here we're just targeting, that's the first thing we're doing, and we're creating a new variable called user input, which is storing whichever value the user puts in here. So now we want to take that string and we actually want to split it up into a bunch of different parts. So we're going to do const new string, and that's going to take in the user input, and we'll do dot split, and we're going to split at each of the characters there. So now what we're doing is we're taking whichever the user puts in and we're splitting it into each different little tiny strings of their own, and now we can manipulate with each of those pieces of data. So now that we have that, we're going to actually reverse it. So now I'm going to create a new variable called reversed, and that's going to take in the new string that we just created, and it's gonna reverse it. Reverse, where is it? Reverse. So now when we do a return, it's gonna reverse the string, and now we just have to join it back together to make it a whole string as we put it into, as the user put it in. So joiner, that just makes sense to me. And we're going to take in the reversed, and we're going to join at each character here. And then we can return joiner, and that is what we want to return. And what we're returning actually now is going to be whatever the user inputs here. We're going to split it up into each single letter. Those letters are going to be reversed, and then we're going to join those letters back into an entire word. And then we're going to return that word. So now here within our function, still within our secret message function, we want to actually render to the DOM. And we're going to actually render here. This is where we want to render to output. So this is what we're getting back. And what we want to return is this scramble here. So it's actually, this joiner is returning the scramble, and so we're gonna return scramble. Then at the end here, we can do a form reset, which will just reset our form every time that we click enter. So the last thing that we want to actually do is we want to add an event listener on our form on our submit button. So we're going to target our form again. We're going to add event listener. And now we're just going to type in, we're asking to listen for the submit button. And when we do, we want to do secret. We want to call the secret message function here. So now that that's all set, let's check out our app and see if it works. So we should be able to type in a message here, hit submit, and there it goes. It returned a backwards reversed string. All right, everyone, thanks for joining me. Hopefully this was easy enough to follow along to. Please feel free to grab this as off of my GitHub and try it on your own, make your own app, do some experimenting, and please feel free to comment if you see anything in my code that you think you could do better or anything that you're confused about. I'd love to answer any kind of questions you have. Thanks for watching.